put your grasses on, and nothing will be wrong. Welcome to the BerserkCast.
Bad. Not cool.
No, come
Put
on.
on the grasses, man.
I thought it was funny.
Before we get into actually talking about the chapter, we'll do a quick introduction. I'm Issy-chan. I'm the one that sounds like this. I'm not caught up on Berserk. I'm not fully caught up. I'm like somewhere in the middle of the Conviction arc. I started reading it like years and years ago, but that's about as far as I've gotten, just for like the overall context. All right, you go, Tiz.
Well, I'm just your average like anime fan, kind of a weeb guy. I've read Berserk for a long time now. Reread it many times. Each time I've already forgotten everything, so each time I have to remind myself. I've been in the limbo of like hiatus, and now in the ultimate limbo of all for being dead. So it is what it is. But here we are. Okay, next.
I'm Alvi, and I have never fucking read Berserk because I am a pleb, and that's what we're here for. Reading it for the first time, I've been surprisingly unspoiled for most of it, so I guess I'm the resident hasn't read the manga. That's me.
Hi, I'm Dolan. I've been watching anime for a very long time now. I've also read a lot of manga. I've read a majority of Berserk.
Very cool accent.
No.
I'm Xenon, the Asian kid here, I guess. I call myself Gas, but everyone treats me like I'm dinner for some reason.
Wait, actually, Alvi, it's amazing that you haven't been spoiled this whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty oblivious to anything that I haven't directly made contact with. If I see spoilers for it, it just like kind of filters out of my head, because if I don't have context, I just can't. It just doesn't process in my brain. Like all I really know is just the funny Eclipse meme, something rape horse. That's about it.
the most essential of Berserk, rape horse.
Various smatterings of knowledge, just all the funny memes. Griffith did nothing wrong. Fucking that's it. That's literally it. I could tell you that much. Actually,
3 silver coins.
I don't know what that is. I haven't even watched the anime. Only seen the first episode of it.
We should do that at some point.
Yeah, we should. The anime was pretty good.
So I guess we can like start with the first thing. What got you guys into Berserk, except for Alvi, or rather Alvi? You are the resident who hasn't watched yet. So what made you want to get into the series?
Well,
Is it because we point a gun at your head?
In the first place, my sensibility. I have specific sensibilities. I like stuff that's cute, fast-paced, abstract. Basically everything that is the exact polar opposite of what Berserk is, which is probably the main reason I haven't gotten around to it. But I also like things that are good, and Berserk is quite good, as far as I can tell. So, that's that's all the reason I need, I guess. If people are talking about it, then it's...
Yeah, actually, there's been a lot of like new people getting into it recently, ever since the news of Miura.
Yeah,
Lots of people have been talking about it more, and
it's a fucking classic legacy series. Iconic as hell. It's
ironic that people get into it when it's basically confirmed that it's over.
Yeah, that too. I'm really bad with ongoing stuff, so just the fact that it is like in all technicality effectively over is a huge factor that just makes it like, oh, this is actually approachable all of a sudden, right? Just like, I prefer the unambiguity of, it just being fairly definitively complete.
There's never a bad time to get into it.
Just the daunting length.
I'm an old school Dark Souls player, and I heard that Berserk is the source material to Dark Souls, and so I just read it whenever I could. I have a lot of the manga, bought it physically.
I don't know. Should we just start with what else do you start with when you're talking about a series other than the title, the name of the series? It's called Berserk.
Ooh.
That's something to talk about, right? It's
It's very snappy. Like you just drop a title like that, and the reader's like, I see. I think like people will have an idea, right? Unlike like the common titles you get nowadays, that is basically a summary, and you read it as like, what is this about? What is this? Why is this?
Yeah, it's one of these rare like English titles that just like takes a random English word. It probably sounds kind of strange to like a native Japanese listener, but it definitely like conveys the right idea of like sort of the roughness of the series, the Western European setting.
Like when you think about it, like Miura wrote this when he was a teenager, so there is like a degree of like edge to it, right? But it's like the cool edge. It's like Berserk.
Yeah, it's like it's strange that it's like not an adjective or a verb, but just a noun, the noun of berserk, right? There's no, not
Right.
like a berserker or berserking, but just berserk, right? I just thought that was kind of interesting. The way it's like transliterated, like you'd think it'd be like, I don't know, Bazaku or something, but it's like Beriserku or something. It's like, what the fuck? I don't know. It's strange. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Another main point I'd like to bring up, I guess, is that like, you know, everyone talks about the things that Berserk has influenced, right? Everyone's like, oh yeah, fucking Dark Souls, you know. But it's like, what was Berserk itself influenced by? You know, I don't think I've really heard about that.
If I remember correctly, he got inspiration from things like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there's you can
Just like a lot of just random fantasy stuff in general, but I don't think there's really anything that's that specific. Just like a lot of like Western stuff, bounty hunter stuff, fantasy stuff.
It's like,
But it is just like it is very original. Yeah.
Like I say that because like I was constantly just thinking of, I guess, aspects of its lineage per se while reading through the first chapter. I guess, like even just like what the fuck is it? The very first panel. The fucking what is that?
Right,
like
with
just
him,
like just this fucking this big ass like I see this and I'm immediately like, oh, Devil Man, right? It's like fucking a woman that becomes a monster, a fucking horrific monster. It's like that feels pretty Devil Man.
You know, it's really interesting because in the 90s, you still had like explicit erotica in manga and anime, right? But no one would literally start with like first page and just like...
Yeah, that's definitely the lineage that I sort of feel coming off of it. Just that very, very pulpy 80s kind of...
It should also sort of be mentioned that Berserk is being like published straight up in a Playboy magazine. It's not like some shonen collection. The same magazine that Sangatsu no Lion is published in, actually.
Yeah.
The writer of that sort of got in because of her connections to Miura. But yeah, they paid Miura a ton of money to put Berserk in their porn magazine, and so like nothing is censored. You just can go all out with this stuff.
It's like, I remember when I read Berserk for the first time, my eyes went wide as saucers when I saw the first picture. It was like, I see. I expected like, okay, so we start with slice and dice, right? And suddenly it's like, oh, I see how it is. And then you go to the next page and be like, what the hell did I just read, man?
The scene with Guts, like doing the demon, the succubus, right? That's not actually the first panel. The very first, at least in the modern publication of it, the very first scene that we get is this image that I posted here in AlviCast of like Guts tied up, right? Like covered in whip marks, like with his head downcast. This is pretty much the first reaction we get to his character and like a lot of the introduction. Like, what do you think of that image as the first impression of this like action hero?
I don't know. I mean, I think that image reappears later on. Like, I was thinking,
right.
I guess I think of it more as like a chapter marker. But I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess there is a juxtaposition there of of having him fucking.
Kind of goes against the idea of a heroic
castrated.
hero, right? Like someone who's always victorious. You literally have a guy at the lowest point of his life.
You know, I guess if we really want to fucking look at it broadly, then the actual first exposure you get is just the fucking cover, right? The cover art.
Oh yeah,
the
the cover.
See Guts looking all badass with his fucking like all these with a fucking crossbow and shit. And then you immediately see that, and you're just like, oh, okay, he's getting fucking whipped down.
Because like everyone, Guts is by far the most badass character of all time. His design is cool. Everything about his story is cool. There's like no one that comes close to him in terms of raw badassness, and like you see that in the front cover of the manga and everything, and everything you see of the series gives off that impression. So when you actually like flip through it and see like the first thing that we actually see of him in World is just being like tied up, dripping with blood, right? It's like
who is this?
Right.
Instant emasculation.
But you go like, who is this? Why is he so
And then-
like? Why
and
is he
then
so low in life? And then you go to the
instant
next page and be like,
remasculation. He's clearly he's clearly
Right.
what
He's
is it?
having
Just,
fun.
It is funny how fucking pulpy it is, especially early on. Like, just, it's like, I don't know. I guess that's not the impression I really had of it just kind of being like one of the first lines out of his mouth is like a fucking quip. Like, it's like a fucking, like, it's a fucking action hero quip. Like, it's like,
Right.
it's like, it's not quite it's not quite what I was expecting, and like,
The grim dark.
yeah, it's like Guts almost comes across like a fucking like a somewhat of like a wisecracking action hero at times in this first chapter at least, and it's like that's that's a bit different than what I expected. It's like I guess my impression of him is as this very stoic kind of character, which I mean he sort of is, but it's like I don't know, his characterization at least in this first chapter is definitely a bit more almost like shonen-y, I want to say. Like,
right. Well, actually, we'll get into this like very later on, but this isn't where Berserk really started. When Miura was like 14, 15, he made a little prototype chapter of Berserk, just a little self-contained chapter. You may like Guts has an eye patch in it. The character designs are a little bit different, and that's where we see like where the series really starts out. We'll get into it like later on when it's.
So he used to have an eye patch?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about that. It's like, he always has his eye closed, but he doesn't have like anything covering it, which is strange.
Yeah.
maybe he's just too poor to buy an eye patch.
Just like as a design, I guess like
that's his original design, which is like it's remarkably similar. Right? Even back in high school, Miura's art was absolutely
he looks
fantastic.
like a fucking chuny.
It's
dude.
like I can't imagine myself like being 14 and drawing something like this. Like,
Right. But like back in those days, it like
it's
pretty
like a
much
fucking
was
yeah. That's
a
actually
shonen
really
chapter. And like he was just like he's not serious at all. He's doing all these like quips and wisecracks and stuff.
Yeah, okay.
When like Miura started doing the series for real, he like changed and modified a lot of that stuff. But a lot of those like early pompy like actiony roots, you still see a lot of them here.
yeah.
And that prototype chapter, the entire thing is like published later on in like volume 14, so we'll eventually get around to it.
Amazing.
Even beyond just the characterization, like even like the art as well, like gave me those vibes as well. Like I wasn't really there are certain shots of like his face where he like straight like this one in particular, like where he straight up looks like a fucking like character out of a fucking sports manga or something, like, look at him. Like
technically it is a sports
like
manga swinging around a big
like
ass
a delinquent
sword.
character in a shonen anime,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like interesting.
Well, if you just narrow in on his face, but then you see his arm holding like the fucking crossbow bolt through someone's fucking face, it's like
It's surprisingly lighthearted in a sense, like like
A lot of it's because of Puck, of course.
yeah,
and,
it's like what the fuck.
vision.
That too. I knew about this character, but I didn't think they'd be this much of like a force, I guess, in this in these early chapters. It's like they're just like what? Well, first of all, I don't think. Well, I don't know what gender even is he. What is he like? Is it a what do I call him?
He's a boy, I think. Just
all right, it's like in the first place, he's not even in the anime. Like in the first episode of the anime, I don't think they cut him out and replaced him for some random woman, and it's like I don't know. It's a weird character because it's like I mean
the two of them sort of give off like a buddy cop vibe.
Yeah, it feels like it's trying to set that up and then subvert it. It feels like it's like trying to set it up in a way that like is like falsely leading you to think it's almost like fucking like Link and Navi or something. Like fucking stoic.
Fuck is way better than Navi. Fuck Navi.
Stoic character with like a fucking annoying like fairy floating around him. It's like especially just like all the fucking like goofy reaction images he does. He's just a fucking cartoon character flying around, and like I think it's interesting how like in the opening that like it starts out so like pulpy. It's like it's like like you have this classic setup, like fucking wandering vagrant walks into town, walks into a bar, and then gets into a fucking scuffle. Yeah, it's like gets into a scuffle saving a fucking damsel in distress, right? It's like
like your most basic adventure.
It's like a fucking spaghetti western or something, you know?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. And he has like the whole like Clint Eastwood cloak with his cape like hanging over his shoulder.
Like, of course, like the violence is obviously a bit extreme, but it's like stylized in a way that's like, fairly over the top. It's like you have.
I would say that the violence goes to the point where it's even comical, right? You're not getting the sense of like Berserker yet. Like who's this Berserker is supposed to represent?
It's graphic, but it's not. I wouldn't say that it feels super, like overly. What's the word? Overly intimate. I guess, right? It's not like. It has like it. This sort of like shifts throughout it, like when the emotional context changes. But I found it interesting that like it's actually like surprisingly like on the surface it's very violent. Obviously, like it's known for being extremely violent, but actually when you really like in practice, it's actually not really as violent as you would think. It's like it's conceptually violent, and obviously the tone often makes it feel very, very extreme. But the actual violence itself, as depicted, isn't actually as extreme as like it's not like indulgent, basically, right? Or like it's almost like
it gets pretty indulgent.
Maybe it gets indulgent later, but like even in this shot, it's like there's a lot of fucking blood there, and there's an indulgence in the image of a dude who has his fucking upper half severed and floating in the air, obviously. Beautiful. But it's like I'm thinking of this from the perspective of like classic fucking like 80s OVAs like fucking Geno Cyber or fucking Angel Cop, where like you literally see like utterly fucking grotesquely detailed hyper violence, right? And it's very, very indulgent, but to such an extreme degree that it's almost like that it's really hard to take seriously. That it's unrealistic and comical. Even it's almost hyper.
It's not only that. Like Miura even adds up like these like funny reaction shots, right? It's like you wouldn't expect someone who's had this like face like skewered by a crossbow bolt to be like having this like silly face. Where it's like Miura's like, yo, this is pretty dark. Like the theme is dark, but it's like I don't want to like drown you in a swamp of darkness.
Right, and like we see sort of that same type of thing with like his approach to the realism as well.
It's certainly morbid, but it's like I'd say that it's sort of it's like basically like when you have like that hyper violence, it becomes sort of hyper real, right? It's like when it's super detailed, it loses its sense of reality, because even though it's like highly extremely detailed and meticulous, it's almost like straying from reality by being too intimate. So it's like in this case it's like it's surprisingly subdued, and I think that gives it a very grounded effect. Right. Like it's like especially later on, it's like it has this interesting it almost has this like how would you say it? There's almost like an elegance to it, I guess, right? It's not like messy, you know what I mean? Like it's like, for instance, like even though like this fucking dude's guts are spilling out everywhere, like it's not like they're like just staining the fucking walls or anything. It's like it's like imagine like some Kill Bill shit where it's just like splattering everywhere. It's not like super like indulging in the raw like viscerality of it. It's more so just depicting like it's, if you think about it, right? If we consider the action that he's being literally sawed in half, then all things considered, this isn't actually that graphic of a panel, right? Considering the action taking place. Like, the action itself is already quite violent, obviously, but for that action, this could have been a lot more, like, significantly more grotesque of an image, right? That's sort of like, I guess that's sort of what I was identifying, right?
Like even if you look at the scene where the guy gets like bisected, right, and then you like, oh, that's horrible, but then you look at the reaction of the people in the background, and you're like, wait, is this a gag manga? Is this what this is?
Like Miura never really lost his sense of cool, right? Like he's willing to, with both with the gore and with like the realism, he's always willing to like bend it enough that it's always still like viscerally just cool. Right, in sort of that kind of shonen-y type of way that actually works surprisingly well with how like grounded the setting is.
Like the most important element to this like softening of the themes is, I think, Puck. Like you literally have like like half a page full of gore, and then you have like a splash of just like Puck being there doing his stuff. It's like, oh, I see how it is.
Yeah, especially like later on, Puck starts to become like even more shamelessly cartoony, and is just like constantly chibi and off model and making crazy faces. Way more than in this first chapter. It's like straight up like. But he adds a lot to the series for sure.
Mm-hmm. I didn't really coin him as a character that'd stick around for too long, but I guess that's interesting.
He's literally the mascot, man.
Just like to be clear, this is happening like in media res.
Yeah.
And like after this, we sort of go into like
it cuts backwards, right?
Right. And so like when that happens,
obviously, it's like there's sort of
there are huge changes.
There's various setups here, right? Of foreshadowing with like, oh, how'd he lose his arm? You know, how'd he get that fucking brand on his neck? You know, that kind of thing.
What's up with the sword?
Yeah.
You know, how did he get these scars? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Joker shit.
Yeah. That's what I was. Yeah. Can we talk about that actually? What the fuck is up with this fucking arm cannon he has? That feels a little like strange to me. It's like, doesn't that seem to a little like, there's this interesting like pastiche of sort of aesthetics almost, where like having a fucking arm cannon. I don't know. That's something you'd expect in like a fucking sci-fi manga or something.
Yeah,
you know?
it's sort of like kind of like what cyberpunk is for sci-fi. You sort of see these little like fantasy punk elements. All throughout Berserk. You get like the armor designs. We see that later with like this big cobra dude in this chapter.
What the fuck is up with that? Fucking snake armor. Like what is that? Like what even is this guy supposed to be? Like he's like even his horse
that's like
has
sort
the
of
fucking scale armor. It's like
one of the big like design themes of the series is that like all the villains are sort of based on animals. And they all like, this guy is sort of like the snake, he's the cobra. We're going to see like a particularly obvious hawk eagle type of thing later on, but
I see something.
Yeah, like he always gets like really, really creative with just like the animals and the designs. This villain though, this cobra dude, in my eyes, is a little bit forgettable. This is sort of maybe the part. This chapter is sort of maybe a little bit too generic, a little bit too faithful to those classic tropes.
Yeah, I will say that I didn't consider it to have necessary. Like I'll definitely say that I feel like it really picks up in chapter 2.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Not that like the foundation isn't solid enough, but it's like I wasn't like fully gripped until like chapter 2 is when I was like, oh fuck, this is actually like I'm actually engaged like a fair amount now. Right.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 1 really feels like a monster of the week sort of villain. It's like, I'm here and I'm gone.
This is what I just thought it was interesting. Well, okay, in the first place, I found that like there's like certain like sort of like the way it like plays around with space at times is kind of interesting. Like, okay, where is it? There's this fucking shot where he's like, they're at like a fucking dining table. Or it's like the main villain's at a fucking dining table, and the table is comically large. It's fucking huge.
Oh yeah, I know.
It takes up the entire goddamn room. And then like he's at the end of it, right? And then he fucking takes like an ear off his plate because he's like fucking eating humans, and he fucking like flicks it all the way to the dude at the other end of the room, and it's like flows because it's like, oh, it's just two images that don't have any like visual continuity that they have to construct, but it's like, how the fuck would that look in practice? It's like, it's just kind of like, it's one of those things that I guess you don't really think too much about, or you just hope doesn't have to be animated, because it's like,
and then you go to the next page where he's like leaving and the tables like feels even longer, and you're like, how did he make it? How did he?
There's certain moments like that where it just sort of has like a minimal sense, where it just sort of like liberal with how it presents, I guess, the spatiality of an environment, right?
I think it's actually like in even more of a broader sense, it's like that with a lot of the world building, where like we don't really know where this town is in relation to any other place. We don't know the name of this town. We never like revisit it. A lot of the places are just sort of there as a backdrop. But there's no like official map of Berserk. You get that for Lord of the Rings, for Game of Thrones. A lot of like the big fantasy series these days have like this huge map and like a really fleshed out world. in Berserk, like Miura, he doesn't really want to tie himself down too much, and so he explicitly like stays away from a lot of those types of things. And you get a lot of stuff that's just like, this is clearly just made to be like a medieval lord's dining room and not like a specific one. It's like a lot of
it sort of preserves like the mystique of like Berserk as a setting, because like Miura's not tying himself down to like, oh, it has to be here and here, and then you start thinking like logistics and stuff, and it kind of takes away from the fantasy.
I don't pay much attention to world building that much, but like, you know, basically anything that even has like the smallest modicum of world building is going to seem impressive to me, or be satisfying to me, right? But basically,
don't get me wrong, the world building is pretty good.
Sure.
Right? It's like there's a lot of like really great details and everything. But
even like so far, I've sort of found it to be like, you know, satisfying in its like presentation of like even just like, you just get a very basic understanding of the town when you walk. You know, there's a basic power structure going on. You know, it's like there's like one panel where it's like first panel when he walks in, it's like the literal first two things you see are a fucking beggar on the streets and a knight on a fucking horse, right? It's like just like, oh, okay, well, you know. And then immediately after that, you see the fucking carriage of fucking children being shipped off.
You literally have a fucking knight leading a caravan full of slaves, and you're like, oh, this isn't very knightly.
This is such a great moment for Guts' character as well. We're just like, he walks past this huge like slave caravan of like kids and everything, and he just like looks on and just like keeps walking.
Like the kids give him a sad look, right? And a typical like hero, like shonen hero, would be like, "Stop right there, criminal scum!" But Guts is like, "None of my business.
You violated the law."
There's definitely an interesting moral kind of outlook, I guess, that this series is presenting, right? Not partially with Guts as a character, but also just as sort of the philosophy of the world itself, right? Like you have this setting of just horrible fucking shit just happening everywhere, people dying just constantly, right?
It's like there's no, like when you look at all the death that happens just in chapter 1, it feels like there's no emotional attachment. It's just like, oh, that's just Bob. Drag him into the street and leave him to rot there. It's like, oh,
it has this like apathy to it, but not one that's like particularly cynical, but more like just practical. You know, it's like, well, you know, the sort of like, you know, shikata ganai. You know, like, well, fuck. World is a fuck.
Like it really feels like thematic for the period, right? It's like people like died left and right in medieval period.
It comes across a little apathetic in the beginning. Like it comes across like in the beginning, like in chapter 1, like Guts comes across as kind of an asshole. Like, holy shit. I wasn't really expecting him to like actively be like antagonized, sort of, you know, like in just how
these guys are bullying a little person. Is this really grounds for like slaughtering all of them?
He makes Puck cry. It's like, man, what a fucking jerk, you know. But obviously that gets sort of contextualized in chapter 2.
That's great. That's like, Guts is so good. This is like such a even early on, he's just insanely fun. All the little moments where he's like being asshole-ish or just like
it's
I found it to be really fun and endearing in its own kind of way.
It's definitely not what I was expecting from his character. Like, you know, you think of this very stoic, fucking serious, brooding kind of guy, but here he is fucking like, you know, cracking jokes while he's getting the crack of a fucking whip on his ass. You know, it's like it's like almost like a classic action hero type character. It's like,
that's such a juxtaposition, though, because he never says anything to anyone, not even Puck. And then suddenly he gets tortured and he like gets talkative. It's like, I see how it is.
Like if you look in the screenshot channel, this is sort of the impression of Guts that like the anime people would have of just like the anime like the music playing, the like
so sad.
This fucking this brooding fucking like kind of almost like maybe like gentle giant, even like highly provoked. Right, like becomes like a fucking enraged beast when he's angry, but like normally having a low temperament and kind of a apathetic attitude. But like no, he's just straight up just like very dismissive and kind of cynical towards people, which is
but it's real funny though. Even if you look at in the image that you just posted, right, it's not wrong actually. It is Guts, but he has too many like faces to him
for sure.
Like whatever you post, that's probably Guts.
We start to see that later on in chapter 1 when he's like in the prison and he has like this dream sequence. We'll get into some of that. But
Well, one thing I what is it regarding the presentation, right? It's like, I'm so obviously the most iconic thing the series is known for, well, argue in terms of its presentation is the art being ridiculously detailed, right? And like,
right.
you know, I'm not the biggest fan of just like, you know, fixation purely on just raw detail and amount of lines that exist within an image. You know, it's like I tend to find that like lines being too dense just creates this very visually busy atmosphere where things sort of just bleed together and are hard to sort of distinguish from one another. But what I've found, like, at least so far, it's like there's actually a surprising amount of restraint in the drawings and in the way they're rendered. Like it's not that there is a lack of detail, but a sort of selective use of it, right? Or like there's certain shots, like there are certain shots that are like fully so you have that, there's almost this, it has strong emphasis, right? Especially with the shading, lots of interesting shading and lighting, right? With like it's very fucking, every time there's a shot with like his fucking cape, it just completely consumes the entire page. It's like very strong visual hierarchy with like, interesting, lots of like dynamic camera angles, even like, more so than I sort of expected, right? It has a very cinematic feel, right? To like sort of, it's sort of engrossing in a way that like manga isn't always like, it's like.
One of the coolest things about Miura, like as an artist, is that he's actually really well versed at drawing images like white on black, where he just takes a black piece of paper and draws white lines, and we see a lot of images throughout the manga that like really accentuate that style. So he has just such a great sense of just like the lighting and what to make really dark and what to make white to have such a really strong composition.
I really feel like Miura has mastered the act of like drawing attention and like retaining attention.
Oh, for sure. To give it that like the cinematic feel and drawing your eye around, and always, even just we go back to that spread of him like chopping the dude in half, like swinging the sword down, and he has like this wide stance, and his like cape is flying and covering up half the screen. It's like such a perfect example of just the stylistic flair, and you see that in like these big over the top moments, but also in a lot of the smaller, like more subtle stuff. A lot of like the facial artwork and the character artwork is, even in the early days of the Berserk manga, a lot of people point out, like, even when like the backgrounds and everything aren't nearly as advanced as they become, there's such a really strong sense of sensibilities to like the characters and the expressiveness of a lot of like the smaller aspects, and all of the fundamentals are all there and really, really strong.
Yeah, what I would say is that the lack of color never feels like a limitation, right? It very much comes across. It feels very organic in a way that like doesn't leave me thinking like, man, I wish this was in color. Like, in fact, I couldn't even imagine a colored version of this fucking manga. It'd be weird. It would just be like,
because the shading is just so detailed. There's so many different like shades of gray.
Yeah, it's just like it's like a fucking watching a Kurosawa film or something. Like a black and white fucking movie. That's just designed with that in mind. It's like.
Right.
That's sort of
like a lot of people, everyone talks about like the detail of the art itself, and just like they post screenshots of like still images and just like, like look at how many all the line work and all the detail, but just there's such a great sense of just the cinematicness and how it's framed and directed and everything, that there's a premium like vintage quality to it that extends beyond just the quality of the artwork itself. It's something that you don't really see in a lot of manga.
Like, I have to say that Miura has really mastered the art of like show don't tell, because as we talked about earlier, he doesn't confirm the places, right? He doesn't name, like, you walk into a town, you don't know what it's named, but like when you look at this shot, for example, and the way it's like composed and the way it's the town is drawn, you immediately can tell that this town has some sort of personality to it. And then you look also at this shot. And then you're like, oh, so I don't need to know the name, but I kind of have an idea what's going on here. It's like, this is some sort of like trading hub. So there's a lot of times like Miura just like shows you, and you're supposed to take from it everything, instead of like being told, like it's being done a lot nowadays.
Right,
Like
and
they
there's a
have to
lot of
spoon-feed you information.
moments like that with the characters as well. Like a lot of these characters have like so much subtlety and just detail and nuance to like how they are and what they're feeling that is just all in the artwork. Because you have like a lot of these like like Guts himself is like this brute grunt like bandit badass. He doesn't really say a lot. And when he does talk, it's mostly just like talking business stuff. But you can still, just throughout the chapter, just get such a strong impression of like what the characters are thinking and feeling at any given time.
I do think that at least in the first chapter, basically, I'd say that I feel like I feel like Guts is designed to be a character that's sort of hard to get a proper read on. Like, I feel like you're supposed to be sort of like questioning your preconception or trying to like, grapple with these conflicting images of how he's supposed to be, right? Like, because I definitely felt this sort of juxtaposition or this sort of almost like back and forth of like, which direction is this character gonna go? It's like, what is the underlying sort of essence of this character, right? Since he sort of
like a lot of times you're asking yourself, is this guy a hero?
Yeah, he says a lot of things that sort of
even
like seem to
with this,
contradict
even with
your
the fight scene at the end, it's like, is he killing the Count to save the people, to rescue the town?
You literally have him leaving a town in flames.
What is it? Yeah, it's like, what is he doing? Like, what are his fucking intentions? Like, what's he up to here? Like, it's like, does he have any second thoughts about this? Is he just like a hardened fucking dude who like just can't fucking afford to think about these things? Too hard. It's like, who knows? It's like and I think it really starts to give you a much more concrete direction. I would basically say that chapter 2 has like this basically this pivotal moment that basically kind of tells you the direction, sort of seemingly, at least as far as I can tell, like, that's the impression I got, right? It sort of gave, at least like, I felt that I had an answer by the time I got to finish chapter 2, right, to that question.
Yeah, there's a lot of like very, very powerful moments that touch on that throughout like volume 2 and 3. That's sort of the whole purpose of this first like little arc. It's not just to like set up the world and everything, but the way that it sets up all the characters and like by giving you just like little pieces of information one after the next, changing your impression. Even like Puck, his impression of Guts is like constantly flipping back and forth along with us. It's really great how that's handled, and there's a lot of like interesting stuff like that to come as well. But just to take a little bit of a step back from that, and back to this like the bar scene, the first action scene we get here. What do you think of this sword?
It's heavy.
It's certainly much too big to be called a sword.
That's the reaction of every single character that sees the sword.
There was a thought I had where it was just like, the sword has so much fucking presence, like as an entity, like it's so fucking funny. It's like
it's a character of its own.
There's it's a fairly like the action is like, you could say it has a sort of a fairly straightforward pattern, right? At least in these first few chapters, where it's sort of like, basically like every single time there's a panel where he grabs the handle. The next fucking page is a massive 2-page spread of something getting fucking sawed in half, right? It's like, in other words, it's like this anticipation and release, like a fucking move, like a super being charged up. There's never even like the action of like seeing him quote unquote unsheath it, or like even like see it in like a gaining momentum. It's just grabs the fucking handle and
it's
then
down.
Dead, right? It's like
that it also like reminds me of like Kurosawa samurai stuff of just like the quick draw, like katana, like
certainly.
But it's so funny though, because up to that point all you saw was a hilt, right? You had him covered in a cloak, the sword was hidden, and then suddenly it's just there.
There is actually a shot where like you can sort of see a little bit under his cloak, and you can kind of make out like rectangle, but it's like you can tell. I guess perhaps at first glance you might not recognize it as a fucking sword.
Yeah, a slab vibe. That's sort of the big meme with the series, is that like it was much too heavy to be called a sword, far too like heavy and rough. That line comes up like 4 or 5 times. Characters keep saying it, but
it's just a hunk of iron.
I've seen a lot of characters in anime that have large swords. We see it in like Final Fantasy.
Yeah, sure. Like,
but this sword, This gigantic sword is just completely fucking different.
What the fuck? Yeah,
and
it's
he
like
swings it around with like the speed of it
Like-
and the momentum of it.
It feels to me like in a lot of like media, like in like especially in like fantasy, right? You have like oversized swords, and you always feel this is too comical, man. This is too much.
Right?
like yeah, that's like become a classic trope. But like, I feel this certainly has to be one of the earlier iterations of it, right? If not just the
Right.
one of the base, right? It's like, what the fuck even is it? Like, isn't there some kind of like some sort of like actual weapon that is somewhat, obviously not that fucking large, but like somewhat similar as like a sort of like a great sword that like is actually used to kill horses? Or am I just am I mistaken?
No, this,
Yeah,
there's
it is
no way
something like
that's
that.
I
Yeah.
could be wrong.
real, but
Even for
just like-
swords like that, you would have to like ride a horse to be able to like, swing it properly. You would need like another momentum.
little like you have all these like anime twink boys that have like tiny
Yeah.
little arms and huge
Like spaghetti
swords.
arms, legs, and suddenly like they swing
But when
around.
you have Guts with these like massive muscles, he's like such a huge buff dude that you can
Yeah.
actually believe that he can like swing the sword, right? He's just like such a huge like bodybuilder type of build.
Like I don't think at any point you feel like this sword is just like, oh, this is just too ridiculous, too funny, man. You just feel, oh, this sword, it means business.
And there's Guts has like multiple swords throughout the series, and the idea is like he keeps upgrading it, and it gets like bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And so like each of the different swords like sort of directly corresponds with like a different period of his life, and they really do like each individual sword that Guts has like really has a character of its own. And this is of course this is like the big one, right? This is the Dragon Slayer.
I do one thing that I think is interesting is like the fact that it's such a fucking massive sword. Like it's not even like you can't even call it a sword. Like as they say, it's a fucking slab. It's an actual. It's like the fucking. It is just a fucking segmented,
A sharp
fucking
slab of iron.
carved. Yeah, it's like you carved out a segment of a fucking wall and just put a handle on it, right, and sharpen it, right, and it's
Yeah,
like
Heracles
it's like
from
you
the
think of
Fate
that, you think of
series
it
is sort of based
like
on that as well.
yeah, exactly, right, and because of that, you think of it as being like this very like when you think of how it would like how you would use it in combat, you would sort of imagine just it just fucking bashes shit, you know.
Yeah.
But every time he uses it, it's insanely clean.
It's elegant and like fast.
You can actually see like the technique, right? Like the way that his stance and like the way he's like swings it.
It's this very like elegant, you know, like just shape that's always like very straight and precise and
I
doesn't
love how
sort of
like
like
it vibrates all the time when he
Yeah,
swings
it's like-
it.
Yeah.
it's like it's making a clear arc and is clearly cutting a perfectly straight line through that arc, right? It's like there's no like it's not messy, you know. It's like it's surprisingly like it's just an interesting. I don't know. It's just very interesting that it like has that
It's
effect.
just like it's so satisfying to see like him just like cleave through shields, cleave through armor. You have like
It's
just
like-
heavy armor
yeah, it's
knights
fucking-
blocking, and
it's
he's just like
it's so fucking funny. Like it's some fucking
Yeah.
like Goemon shit where it's just like this fucking sword that you can cut through it. Like his sword success rate is literally that of a fucking like Goemon type character. Right? It's like if this dude could fucking cut down a fucking mountain, I wouldn't be surprised. You know, that wouldn't at this point I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't be so surprised if something like that happened. You know. That's the
No, but
impression
it's
it gives.
really interesting. Like when you see a sword like this, right? You just expect it to be like, yeah, it's just a messy sword style, right? It's just like swinging around and hoping something dies. But then you look at Guts, it's almost like an art form the way he swings his sword. Like you can tell he's been training.
Yeah,
he
it's
knows
like,
what he's
who
doing.
the fuck taught him how to do this? Who's the other guy? Who's the other guy that can wield this sword and can fucking teach someone to use it? Like, it's got to be fucking self-taught, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's so there's scenes where he's like he ties like huge tree logs to his sword as an additional weight and just like it's so funny. But yeah, there's like Guts, it's not like some supernatural thing where Guts like this is like the magic sword that only he can wield. It's
Sure.
like no, he's just strong. The only
just the
reason why
fucking
Guts can wield
strongest
this
guy.
is because of his muscles. It's just like it's just like literally just like 1,000-pound sword, and he just has big enough biceps that he can just swing it around easily, and like no one else can. It's fucking great. I love it. Satisfying.
Like you really feel the weight behind each swing, especially when he draws the vibrations, as you like said. Like you can tell this sword is like I wouldn't even be able to like lift it, to be honest.
Yeah. But yeah, you can't really talk about early Berserk without just having a whole section about the sword. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Like when you think about it, yeah, this series, like chapter 1, it actually has like 3 main characters: Puck, Sword, Guts.
in ordered by size.
Right.
Size and presence.
So I guess the next sort of like big thing to talk about is the scene where he's like in prison after he gets tortured.
Yeah.
He's being kept in this cell, and he sort of sees this creature.
Yeah, what the fuck
right?
is that?
This little bit of a dream.
The fuck is that fucking monstrosity that starts crawling up? Is that like a hallucination or something? It doesn't seem to physically exist.
It is there.
Really? Because it just gets ignored after the scene, after Puck shows up.
That's another one of like the big pieces of foreshadowing. But
it's like it starts crawling towards him, but then Puck shows up, and then it never gets brought up again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, is that what is that?
And like the specific thing I wanted to bring up is Guts' reaction to it and how he like responds to it. What do you think of that?
he's fucking pissed. He's like, get the fuck away from. I mean, it's hard to. You know, his reactions always seem to be this mix of, well, I guess Puck literally describes this himself, but this mix of fear and anger. That's how I just, it's just like almost like it's almost like exercising a demon through fucking violent chanting, like just get the be gone, get the fuck away from me, That's sort of like this energy I get. Where just like if I scream at it loud enough, hopefully my energy will fucking cause it to dissipate. It's like it's this very like almost like false confidence perhaps, but it's like it's genuine, but it's like it almost feels like sort of like a front that he's putting up almost as almost a way to like calm himself, I guess.
Like
or
it's really funny that this is where he like Guts got the most animated.
It's almost like the almost like yeah, it's like almost like he does this kind of thing a lot, I guess, is sort of what I'm getting at. And it's like, it sort of feels like this almost like feeling of like, I guess it doesn't make as much sense in this cut. Maybe it does, but it's almost like this feeling of like impending death. Like, if I'm going to die, I'm going to go out fucking screaming, like I'm going to go out with like with my last breath. Down, you're coming my last breath is going to be a fucking big one,
Right. He's like, because Guts is sort of this like normal human, regular dude going up against these huge demons, there's always that sense of like of urgency, of life and death, and it's always, even against the battle of this Cobra dude, he gets knocked
tossed around like a ragdoll.
There's really not a sense of like, oh, he'll be fine. It's like oh god, I fear for this man. Like
he's
like even though it's like he's not gonna die, but it's like what the fuck, like anything else could happen to him. Literally anything else, and it's like that.
Like lose another arm and leg. Psh, no big deal.
It's just like, oh fuck, dude. Like, what kind of torture is gonna fucking befall my guy?
Yeah, I love that intensity of him though that he always brings to the action scenes and everything.
I mean, this is the main scene I was thinking of when I'm thinking like, Guts is kind of an asshole. It's like, you see, because you have this sense of like, he's very clearly the type of character that pushes people away. He's very detached, right? He's almost like avoiding attachment, right, in a sense, and it feels. The way it feels to me is less like he just prefers to keep to himself, but more like he sees it as like a necessity, right? Like if he doesn't, then other people are going to suffer because of it. Like because like he clearly you almost get the sense that like obviously he's like fucking just shitting on Puck the whole fucking time, but as soon as he leaves, he's like, well, hold on, where are you going? It's like it's almost like this like hesitance to watch him like leave. It's not like really this relief or instant sort of like this instant kind of like oh fuck, finally he's fucking gone. But it's like
Guts is already going used to Puck,
it almost feels like
gone.
He's a bit of a tsundere, like, yeah. But not necessarily in like an emotional sense, like because obviously it's not just that he's like doesn't want to open up, but almost that he feels that it's like dangerous to do so. And I feel like that's substantiated in chapter 2 somewhat.
I love that, like, the last panel we get of the first chapter is just like, where, like, you get the name drop where Puck says Berserk, and you see the entire
what
town
the fuck
just
is up
covered
with that?
in
It's like,
flames. It's like we killed the Cobra dude, right? Like
Berserk.
the demon is dead, but this entire place is on fire.
Like, it
Everyone
makes you
died.
think: is this whole thing because of guts? This town on fire, man. It's like,
what is
I
up
don't
with
know.
like the name? Like, what is up with the name drop? Like, where did that word come from? Like, and it's like, it's not even just like Puck literally uses it in the exact same way, like as a noun. Like, it's straight. It's like where is this coming from? Like, what is he like describing here, or like expressing? Right? It's like,
Maybe it's the
I don't
first
know.
signs of English.
it's. I guess I thought it was funny. I just thought it was kind of funny. It's just like,
Right.
huh, okay, cool.
Right, like it's a cheesy moment, of course, but I think it does like hit home sort of just the idea of like the chapter and even just the series, right? Of just
Sure.
like the chaos.
It's a very
and just,
like, it's a very like, it's just one of those classic fucking beats of just like, there you go, say the fucking title as he's walking off, bam.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost like this obligation of just like,
But I think like normally people would just stop with this scene, right? And they probably wouldn't revisit. But then you literally have next chapter, and he just like keeps confirming. It's like, hey, yeah, don't involve yourself with gods, man. It's a bad idea. Don't do it.
Guts like encounters this big count dude, and he like sort of name drops this thing. He's like, "So you're the Black Swordsman, the one who's been hunting us apostles." You get like all these little like name drops and foreshadowing moments, but you get the impression that Guts is like, he really is just going around like hunting these bitches. Right? He's not trying to like save the town.
Yeah.
He doesn't even, he cares about the town, but ultimately his number one goal is just to kill.
It's like, he's not the type that's gonna fucking just, kill everyone else if it like for the express purpose of like, he wouldn't go out of his way to kill everyone, even like, maybe even if it would necessarily get him closer to his goals, right? But it's not that he would necessarily be hung up over it if they'd happen to die, or if like, because I especially I think that a pretty key moment, I think, is when he fucking like, this is actually probably at a pretty defining moment early on that I didn't really think too much about until just now, but like, it's like right at the beginning after he comes out of the bar, right? He fucking gets confronted by a bunch of like officers, and it's like, oh man, he's about to pull out that fucking sword and start shredding and then no, he just fucking says
Nope.
no.
Just
I give in.
me.
It's like,
Right.
oh, okay. It's like,
Yeah.
I see. It's like,
And then they torture him, and like no reaction
seems
at
like
all.
this like lack of confidence. Like, okay, well, I guess he couldn't, take on all of these guys. But it's like, he probably could. It's like,
Yeah.
it definitely seems
Yeah,
like
but,
it's more of a
I
conscious
like
decision.
that sort of. I like that like human aspect of him, I guess, though. That like even
Yeah.
when there's like 13 dudes coming up against him, he's like, he doesn't want to unnecessarily like.
Yeah.
Like if you take the trope of a berserker, right? That's literally where like a berserker goes. Yeah, I was waiting for this, and takes out his sword.
He's not completely consumed by his goals, In a
But
sense.
he's very
still,
like I guess like the best way to express this is that Guts is a very like he's a very practical person.
Yeah.
And like he's not going to just fight them for the sake of fighting them. If it's going to be messy, if it's going to draw attention, if there's a risk of him like dying or getting injured, he'd rather just avoid the fight altogether. And he knows like when it's time to surrender.
I could definitely have seen like the preconception of him just sort of being like a fucking brutish kind of meathead type character that's just like, I will kill anything and everything that moves if it's in between me and my objective.
You breathe at me
Like-
wrong, I'm killing you. But it's not
Granted,
happening.
like, you could say that that's sort of how he becomes when he goes berserk, right? But in intense
Berserk.
situations. But it's like his general temperament is surprisingly subdued, I guess.
Right. Even in the heat of battle, he's not
He's
even
quite
that
calm,
strained
yeah.
a lot of times. He's like very, very,
He's
very
pretty
relaxed.
calm, unless like external things start happening, basically.
Right. Like he's done this shit before like a million fucking times. It's just like you get a sense of his experience through that.
The fucking part where he just like he's like hiding under the fucking corpses and shit. It's like, holy fuck, dude.
Beautiful, beautiful.
You have a shot like that, right? But immediately the shot afterwards, you have this like focused look on his face.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I guess he's not a full berserker.
I also quite
I
like
love
this
this
panel.
like this machine gun crossbow. That's another one of those like fantasy punk elements.
His prosthetic arm is literally like a Swiss knife.
Right.
This I like this panel a lot. Like, it really emphasizes what a lot of the aspects of the presentation that I like, because it's like when it first hits your eyes, it's like a little bit messy. It's like, oh, what the fuck is going on? But then like it fills in like really quickly, because it's got it's literally got a bunch of speed lines going into the vanishing point, right? And then like you have like Guts in this very striking pose, shaded in a different way from in a completely different way as like a silhouette compared to the foreground. And then you have like the fucking dynamic perspective aspect of the arrows flying towards the fucking screen, and in like this, with that like foreshortening, and it like gives it this very like it instantly like clicks as like an action shot, and it's like, oh fuck, like whoa, like I can fully envision this right now. It's like
so like while we are talking about the action, I guess we can just get into like the whole action scene where he fights the Cobra dude. I don't really know his name, but
I don't remember. Did he even have one?
I don't think I think he has like a rank or something. He's like,
it was just like, my lord.
Calling him a Cobra dude is you find it off.
Yeah. But that's sort of like the first, I guess. Like, we've seen Guts like fighting humans before that point. I guess it's not the first demon he kills. He kills the succubus with like his in the very first scene, right? He like gets the fire cannon, he blows up the succubus. That's his favorite way to take them down. But this is like the first actual like 1v1 type of duel with a very strong that we see.
I think it's fucking. I think it's funny that like the very first fucking antagonist, right? Just almost as if like it's almost this like statement, It's like, it's almost like you're setting a precedent for like how you're gonna like one up this guy like for the next for future antagonists, and they just straight up say, you know what? Let's just have a guy that eats babies. Like, literally. It's a fucking shot. Just fucking actual, what I assume is just an actual child on a fucking pike, and he's just fucking just soaking in its blood. Just drooling it like it's a fucking steak.
Right.
And it's just like, this is the first antagonist? Like, you're gonna one up this guy? Like, what the fuck?
Oh, sure,
I thought it was funny.
Sure.
It's like, oh god, like what the fuck am I in store for, dude? What the hell? I like how you go from like him just like elegant, just like fine dining, just this sort of like, just almost like it looks like fucking like some fine cuisine that he's eating there. It's
right,
like, it's
and then
like,
just an ear out of nowhere,
and then just like this shit. It's just like, okay,
slurp, right? But yeah,
it's like, all right, sure.
He's arguably like my least favorite villain in the series. I guess he's very cartoony. Right, and he's like, he's a fitting opponent for like he's a fitting like level 1 boss, stage 1 boss.
Very much feels like a kind of episodic villain. Like he's even got a funny animal theme. Right. It's like
he's literally a monster of the week.
Feels like one of the bosses you'd see in in like fucking like Ninja Scroll or something. Just like on the way to the fucking big bad. It's like, oh, general number 1, fucking snake guy, fucking,
Yeah, but that villain of the week formula gets subverted very quickly, even with just the second chapter. Before that, though, any last thoughts about the first chapter or the first impressions? What do you think?
Yeah.
What about you, Dolan? What do you think of the first chapter?
The whole chapter in general. I enjoyed it, personally speaking. It got us to see a brief outlook of like what the series has to come with it. Like, it also introduced a lot of the gore and the gothic type of style, like as a few of you have said about they've got that's how a lot of Dark Souls took influence from, correct? Or Demon Souls, sorry. Then also within saying that though, we also saw how one man who's really, what would you classify him as, an anti-hero?
Yeah.
That sounds about right. I feel like he's the absolute epitome
Yeah,
of an
he's like the
anti-hero.
epitome of an anti-hero, right? Yeah, so but you see him in some aspects, like when we were talking about in the jail cell, for an example, we saw him at a bit of a vulnerable point as well when he said like get away from it, what and whatnot.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so it wasn't really as you guys are pointing out before, it wasn't really a classical shonen type of manga where it involves one person ultimately being the superhero, like being
yeah,
I don't know how to
Hmm.
put it in words. Like, it's like he's not like the pinnacle of everything, doing the right for justice. He's just doing thing. He's just trying to live in the whole situation. But at the same time, he kind of contradicts that by fighting monstrously sized people and a monstrous horde of people.
yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great setup for a series. I love Guts' vulnerability. All the artistic aspects are really strong.
Yeah, and I think when I saw the sword originally, I thought Final Fantasy like seven got a lot of its the Buster Sword was inspired of it. That's what I thought personally
Mhm.
speaking. I could be very wrong on that.
It went on to inspire and just like influence tons of different things. Right, we talked about Dark Souls, Final Fantasy, pretty much any like anime fantasy thing, even Western fantasy stuff. Right, like when Miura did ultimately pass, everyone was on Twitter like paying their respects, paying their tributes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to me,
so
the first chapter was enormous. Like, like when you
mhm.
take it into perspective of like your typical first
It's
chapter,
just quite long. Yeah.
you have like maybe like two
It's
two
a
to
full
four like
story arc.
ideas that are like thrown like in front of you and be like, this is probably the image of the series. But then you look at Berserk, it's like 90 pages, first
Yeah.
chapter, and then
Yeah.
Miro like just keeps throwing out cards, right? But then you pick up the
Mhm.
card and you realize the one card is a whole deck. And it's like, what the fuck, man? Like, how much
Yeah.
detail do you
Quite
want to put
dense.
into first chapter? It's
Yeah,
crazy.
you know.
So
Kind of went overkill on that but I liked it though. That all the detail they put into it.
right.
90 pages was a lot though.
Mhm. Yeah, it is sort of it's sort of a slow introduction in a few ways, both because this chapter is kind of slow, but also because like we have to spend like 2-3 volumes before we really like go back to the start of the story. Pretty much this entire arc before we jump back in time is like the introductory arc, and it's 3 volumes long, right? That's quite a lot of pages before we actually go to the starting point of the story and like see where it all began. But
Like when you think about it, right? Like the first chapter, I don't think you will ever lose like attention span in the first chapter.
right.
And then you take another example where it's done wrong. You have Fate Zero episode 1 that is 47 minutes, just pure chore. You have to like crunch through it. It feels painful. There's just all like just
Oh,
information
hold
being
on,
fed
hold
to
on.
you on a spoon.
Yeah,
And
I don't know
I
about
like
that one.
Fate Zero episode 1. I don't know about
I
that,
don't know about that one.
but yeah,
You're on
yeah,
a
yeah.
fate
it's
Like
just
server,
it's
even
you
just
even
like
know.
from my point of view. It's like
yeah, it's a great
to a Fate fan, it's like good. You have a
right,
lot of
right.
information that's been conveyed, but it's like to some people, I would say it could be like too overbearing.
Yeah,
Maybe if you
lots
can't
lots
read.
of people say that. Lots of people have that complaint, but even
Lots
though
of people
like
can't
we
read.
say it's like a sort of a slow introduction, but like this is a good chapter. I think it actually moves at like a pretty surprising pace. It's 90 pages long, but it blows by like way faster
Like
than
when
you'd
you think about it, it
expect.
actually didn't like lose its pace. It kept
Mhm.
moving forward without like stopping anywhere.
Right, right. So then we'll move on from that. Chapter
Yeah.
two is
Well,
very interesting. It's
we should. Oh, hold on. We should probably like. I mean, we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes, so I feel like that itself is enough for a full episode. So like we could just like. I feel like we could just like stop our recordings and then export them, and then we could like continue, and then do another one.
Like
Or,
this
like
is a good stopping point.
it'd probably be good
yeah,
for
Chapter
people
yeah.
to
one.
just like
We
quickly.
yeah we could stop here and then do chapters 2 and 3. Finish up volume 1 next time.
I
Yeah.
mean, we could just
Or
record that
right
right
now.
now as well, but like, after we export, at the very least, export the files that we have right now, so that they, and Xenon also left as well. So like,
Like this
Right.
same exact thing happened the other time when we did like the whole analysis of the first chapter. It took like 2 hours.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be
Yeah.
volume 1, and we just like stopped at chapter 1.
hey, it's me from the future. The episode is over, but we forgot to record an outro, so here I am. Thanks for watching. We had fun making this, so I hope it was enjoyable to listen to. Yeah. Hopefully we can make it through the full series, but we'll see how it goes, I guess. Might even have some bonus episodes for the anime or something. I guess I'll just fade out. I don't know how else to end this.